So I went into our bedroom and she wasn't there, and that was the first time really that the panic hit. And I just ran back into her bedroom, and literally at that point the curtains, which were closed, just kind of flew open, and that was when I noticed that the window was open as far as it could go and the shutters outside had been raised all the way up.
And during that, Jane went to check on her children. And it was at that point, she was just past us, going up to the corner, and she saw a man carrying a young girl with almost, she described independently.
What if the very person who claimed to see Madeleine McCann being carried away that night actually proves her parents are lying? Jane Tanner, one of Kate and Gerry McCann's closest friends, swears she saw a man walking away with a small child. At 9:10 p.m. on May 3rd, 2007 was so certain about what she witnessed that she gave detailed statements to Portuguese police, describing the child's pink pajamas and the way the man held her. But here's the problem that nobody talks about. Jane Tanner knew Madeleine McCann personally. She'd spent 6 days at the same resort with the McCann family. She'd seen Madeleine every single day, played with her, watched her run around the pool area, heard her voice, knew her face better than most strangers ever would. So, if Jane Tanner really saw someone carrying a child that night, and if that child was truly Madeleine McCann, wouldn't she have recognized her immediately? Wouldn't any normal person who knows a 3-year-old girl be able to identify her, even from a distance, even at 9:10 p.m.? After all, Praia da Luz is brightly lit at night, almost as bright as day. Have you ever caught someone in a lie so obvious it made you question everything else they told you? Because that's exactly what's happening here, and most people completely miss it. The official story wants you to believe that Jane Tanner witnessed the actual abduction in progress, that she was the key witness who could prove Madeleine was taken by a stranger. But when you really think about it, her story creates more problems than it solves. If she truly saw Madeleine being carried away, she would have known it was Madeleine. She would have screamed, chased after the man, done something, anything to stop what was happening. Instead, she casually walked back to dinner and said nothing for hours. The contradictions don't stop there. Kate McCann claimed the bedroom window was forced open, shutters damaged, clear signs of a break-in. Portuguese investigators found Kate's fingerprints on that window and zero evidence of forced entry. Gerry McCann told police he used a key to enter through the locked front door during his 9:05 p.m. check, then later changed his story completely, saying he went through the unlocked back door instead. These aren't small details you forget under stress. These are the kind of specifics that innocent parents would remember with crystal clarity. The timeline they've constructed falls apart when you examine it closely, and Jane Tanner's impossible sighting is just the beginning. If you want to understand what really happened in apartment 5A that night, you need to subscribe right now, because the evidence we're about to reveal will change everything you thought you knew about this case. When Kate McCann discovered Madeleine missing at 10 p.m. that night, she immediately created a specific narrative about how the abduction happened. She told Portuguese police that the bedroom window was wide open, pushed as far as it could go, with the exterior shutters pulled all the way up. She described a strong breeze blowing through the room, so powerful it slammed the bedroom door shut in her face. The curtains were fluttering dramatically in the wind. This wasn't just an open window. Kate painted a scene of forced entry, a violent break-in where someone had obviously smashed their way inside. Within hours of Madeleine being reported missing, Kate and Gerry McCann were making phone calls to family and friends back in the UK. By the next morning, British newspapers were running headlines about damaged shutters, forced entry, and a clear abduction scene. Multiple relatives and friends told reporters the same story. The shutters had been jammed open, or forced. Someone had broken into apartment 5A, grabbed Madeleine, and escaped through the bedroom window. The media ran with this narrative for days, but Portuguese forensic teams found a completely different story when they examined the physical evidence. There was no damage to the shutters, no scratches, no dents, no signs that anyone had forced them open from the outside. The metal wasn't bent or broken. The locking mechanism worked perfectly. Crime scene technicians dusted those shutters for fingerprints, and Spanish news footage the next morning showed them in perfect condition. The only fingerprints found on the bedroom window belonged to Kate McCann. 5 clear prints. No gloves had been used. No tools had touched that window. Here's the technical reality that destroys Kate's story. Opening those shutters from the outside would be physically impossible without breaking them. The design doesn't allow it. Yet, forensic experts found 0 evidence of damage. So either Kate McCann was completely wrong about what she saw, or she was deliberately lying about how the window got opened. Gerry McCann's story has even bigger problems. On May 4th, during his first official police statement, Gerry told investigators exactly how his 9:05 p.m. check happened. He left the tapas restaurant, walked the longer route around to the front door of apartment 5A, found the front door locked, used his key to get inside, checked on all 3 children, used the bathroom, then left through the same locked front door. He was very specific about this sequence of events. Kate McCann gave her statement that same day. She told police she had entered the apartment at 10 p.m. through the unlocked backsliding door, not through any locked front door. Her version directly contradicted Gerry's account. 6 days later, when Portuguese police brought Gerry back for more detailed questioning, he completely changed his story. Now he claimed he had entered through the unlocked backsliding door, just like Kate said. The front door probably wasn't locked after all, he explained. He aligned his new version with both Kate's statement and their friend Matthew Oldfield's account of entering through the sliding door earlier that evening. This isn't a small memory lapse. This is changing the fundamental details of how you accessed your apartment on the night your daughter disappeared. Real parents under genuine stress don't forget whether they used a key to unlock a door or just slid it open. They don't forget which route they took to check on their missing child. These are the exact details that would be burned into your memory forever. The psychological reality is simple. When people tell the truth, their core story stays consistent. They might add small details later as memory gets triggered, but the basic sequence of events doesn't change. When people lie, they often have to adjust their story to match what other people are saying, or to fit with evidence they didn't expect investigators to find. Gerry McCann changed his story to match Kate McCann's version. Kate McCann's window story doesn't match the physical evidence. Their friend Jane Tanner claims she saw the abduction, but couldn't recognize the child she knew personally. If you think something's fishy about these coordinated stories, hit that like button right now and share this video, because we're just getting started with exposing the truth. Jane Tanner's story becomes even more ridiculous when you break down what she's actually claiming happened. At 9:10 p.m. on May 3rd, she left the tapas restaurant to check on her own daughters sleeping in a nearby apartment. On her way back, she says she saw a man walking across the street carrying a small child. She noticed the child was wearing pink pajamas, which matched what Madeleine had on that night. She thought it was odd that the parent hadn't wrapped the child up better since it was cold outside. But here's where her story completely falls apart. Jane Tanner had been vacationing with the McCann family for 6 straight days. She'd watched Madeleine play by the pool, eat meals with the group, run around the resort grounds, and interact with the other children every single day. This wasn't some distant acquaintance or a child she'd only met once. Jane knew Madeleine's face, her voice, her mannerisms, the way she moved and carried herself. Any normal person who'd spent that much time with a 3-year-old would be able to identify her instantly, even from a reasonable distance at night. Praia da Luz is brightly lit at night. So, when Jane Tanner claims she saw someone carrying a child in pink pajamas but couldn't tell if it was Madeleine, she's asking you to believe something psychologically impossible. If you saw your close friend's daughter being carried away by a stranger, your brain would immediately recognize her. You wouldn't casually think, oh, that parent should have wrapped their kid up better. You'd scream, you'd chase after them. You'd do whatever it took to stop what was happening. The timeline makes Jane's story even more unbelievable. Gerry McCann left the restaurant at 9:05 p.m. to check on the children. It took him about 2 minutes to walk to apartment 5A, where he says he found all 3 kids sleeping peacefully. He He used the bathroom, which adds another minute or two, then walked outside and bumped into fellow vacationer Gerry Wilkins around 9:08 p.m. They stood on the street having a casual conversation about tennis and kids for about 5 minutes. Jane Tanner says she left the restaurant at 9:10 p.m. and walked right past Gerry and Jeremy on her way to check her own children. According to her story, she saw them standing there talking, but neither man noticed her walking by, even though she was close enough to hear their conversation. Then, just moments later, she spotted the man carrying the child across the street. This means someone would have had to enter apartment 5A after Gerry left at 9:08 p.m., locate Madeleine's bedroom, pick up a sleeping 3-year-old without waking the twins sleeping in the same room, and carry her outside, all within about 2 minutes. That's an incredibly tight window for any abductor to work with, especially one who supposedly didn't know the apartment layout. But the visibility problem exposes the biggest flaw in Jane's account. She claims she walked directly past Gerry McCann and Gerry Wilkins, 2 men standing under a streetlight having a conversation, and none of them saw each other. Gerry and Jeremy both confirm they were talking at that exact time and location, but neither recalls seeing Jane. How do 3 people miss each other on an empty street when 2 of them are standing still and talking? The answer is simple. Jane Tanner is lying about when and where she walked that night. Her timeline doesn't work because she's trying to create an alibi for something that never happened the way she describes it. Comment below and let everyone know what you think about Jane Tanner's credibility, because this case depends on whether people believe her impossible story.
Further than we'd left it. We always close it quite far over, but just enough so some light gets in, and it's quite open. And it was our friend Matt who had checked on the children at 9:30 when he was checking on his daughter next door. And I thought to myself, well, maybe Matt's left the door open when he's checked on them. So I walked over to the bedroom door and I was about to close it too again. And as I did that, it kind of slammed shut. And I thought, oh, there must be a draft. And I checked the door behind me and I hadn't left that open. And then I opened the door again of the children's bedroom just to leave it open a little bit. And that's when I really looked in. And I couldn't quite make out Madeleine in her bed. And I just looked and looked, and it was obviously quite dark. But then I realised she wasn't actually there, and I thought, well, she must have wandered through to our bedroom, and maybe that would explain why the door was open. So I went into our bedroom, and she wasn't there, and that was the first time really that the panic hit. And I just ran back into her bedroom, and literally at that point, the curtains, which were closed, just kind of flew open, and that was when I noticed that the window was open as far as it could go, and the shutters outside had been raised all the way up. And I just knew straight away that someone had taken her. So
this was your first thought?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no way a young child could have got out.
Warm, and I'd got a big jumper on, and I can remember thinking, oh, that parent's not a particularly good parent, they've not wrapped them up.
And could you tell whether it was a boy or a girl?
Only because the pyjamas had a pinky aspect to them, so you'd presume a girl. It was actually quite cold.
In your sketch, he appears to be carrying the child in a sort of unusual way.
Yeah, I was carrying sort of across the body like that. I suppose in hindsight you probably think somebody would carry them more against the shoulder.
And I have to ask you this, are you absolutely sure of what you saw? Because it was a long time ago and it was only for a brief period.
Brief period, but at the time I knew what I'd seen. I'd gave that information to the police, and
while everyone focused on Jane Tanner's questionable story about seeing a man at 9:10 p.m., another family witnessed something far more damaging to the McCann narrative. Martin Smith, an Irish tourist, was walking back to his accommodation with his family around 10 p.m. that same night when they encountered a man carrying a small girl in his arms. This sighting happened about 270 meters south of apartment 5A, down a dark street that leads directly toward the beach. The location is crucial. If someone wanted to dispose of evidence or hide something permanently, the beach would be the perfect destination. It's isolated, dark at night, and the ocean can wash away traces of whatever happened. The timing also matters because this was right around when Kate McCann claims she discovered Madeleine missing from her bed. Martin Smith and 2 family members gave detailed statements to Portuguese police on May 26th, describing the man they saw. But what happened 4 months later changes everything about this case. On September 9th, Kate and Gerry McCann were declared official suspects by Portuguese authorities. They immediately flew back to England with their twins, landing at East Midlands Airport, where media crews were waiting to film their arrival. Martin Smith was at home in Ireland that evening, watching the 10 p.m. news coverage of the McCann's return. The camera showed Gerry McCann walking down the aircraft steps, carrying his young son, Sean, in his arms. Martin Smith watched that footage and felt his blood run cold. The way Gerry held his child, the posture, the walking style, the overall body language, it all looked exactly like the man he'd seen that night in Portugal, carrying a small girl toward the beach. The memory hit Martin Smith so hard that he couldn't shake it for days. Finally, on September 20th, he picked up the phone and called Leicester Police, the local force responsible for the McCann investigation in the UK. The officer who took that call wrote detailed notes about what Martin Smith reported. According to those official police records, Smith told them that watching Gerry McCann carry his son off that airplane was like an action replay of what he witnessed in Portugal. Martin Smith wasn't some conspiracy theorist or attention seeker. He was a regular Irish tourist who had no reason to lie about what he saw. He'd already given his statement to police months earlier, long before the McCanns became official suspects. He only contacted authorities again because seeing Gerry on television triggered such a powerful recognition that he felt compelled to report it. The implications are staggering. If Martin Smith is correct, then Gerry McCann was walking toward the beach carrying a child at 10 p.m. on May 3rd, 2007. That's the exact time when Kate McCann claims she discovered Madeleine missing from apartment 5A. The distance from the apartment to where Martin Smith saw the man is about a 3-minute walk for an adult male. This timeline would mean Gerry McCann left the tapas restaurant, went to apartment 5A, then carried Madeleine's body toward the beach for disposal, all while Kate was still at dinner with their friends. When Kate went to check on the children at 10 p.m., she would have known exactly what she'd find: an empty bed and an open window designed to support their predetermined abduction story. Martin Smith's identification of Gerry McCann destroys the entire official narrative. It places the father at the scene, carrying a child, at the exact time the mother claims to have discovered their daughter missing. This isn't circumstantial evidence or speculation. This is eyewitness testimony that directly contradicts everything the McCanns have claimed about that night. The physical evidence completely destroys the abduction theory when you examine it scientifically. That bedroom window in apartment 5A measured only 50 centimeters across, barely 20 inches wide. For most adults, their shoulders are wider than that opening. Even if someone could squeeze through sideways, they'd have to hold onto the window frame while climbing in, then somehow pick up a sleeping child and pass her back through that same narrow space without waking the twins sleeping just feet away. The logistics become even more impossible when you consider the shutters. Portuguese investigators confirmed these shutters cannot be opened from the outside without breaking them. There's no mechanism that allows external access. Yet forensic teams found no damage, no tool marks, no evidence that anyone forced their way in. The only fingerprints on that window belonged to Kate McCann. If an intruder really used that window, they would have left traces of their presence. But here's what exposes the calculated nature of this story. Every piece of evidence the McCanns presented supports their abduction narrative perfectly. The open window suggests forced entry. Jane Tanner's sighting provides a witness to the crime in progress. The jammed shutters story, which multiple family members told British media, creates the image of violent break-in. Kate's description of strong winds and slamming doors adds dramatic effect. These elements work together too well to be coincidental. Real crimes don't usually provide such convenient evidence packages. When children actually get abducted, the scene is typically messy, confused, and full of contradictory information that investigators have to sort through. The McCann case presented investigators with a neat story where everything supported one conclusion. That's a red flag for experienced detectives who know genuine crimes rarely wrap up so cleanly. The behavioral analysis raises additional concerns. When parents truly believe their child has been taken by strangers, their emotional responses follow predictable patterns. They become desperate for information, willing to consider any possibility, focused entirely on getting their child back. They don't typically spend time managing media narratives or coordinating their stories with friends. Kate and Gerry McCann's public appearances showed remarkable composure for parents whose 3-year-old daughter had just vanished. They gave controlled interviews, maintained consistent talking points, and seemed more focused on protecting their reputations than finding Madeleine. Their body language during press conferences showed none of the desperation or raw emotion you'd expect from parents in genuine crisis. Compare their behavior to other high-profile cases where children actually were abducted. Those parents typically appear frantic, emotional, sometimes incoherent with grief. They beg constantly for their child's return. They break down during interviews. The McCanns presented themselves as calm, articulate, and media savvy from the very beginning. The coordination between Kate, Gerry, and Jane Tanner also suggests prior planning. All 3 accounts support the abduction theory, despite containing internal contradictions that should have made their stories incompatible. It's as if they agreed on the general narrative but didn't work out all the specific details before giving their statements. The abduction narrative was constructed to deflect suspicion and create public sympathy. But when you analyze each element carefully, the whole story collapses under scrutiny. Share this video right now if you care about protecting innocent children, and adults must be held accountable for their evil acts.
I went outside, and I was outside the apartment, and I met one of the other guests, and he was coming the other way with his kid, and I actually crossed the road to chat to him, and we were sort of chatting for about 5 minutes. And during that, Jane went to check in her children, and it was at that point she was just past us, going up to the corner, and she saw a man carrying a young girl with almost, she described independently the pajamas that Madeleine had on. And she didn't see the child's face. She didn't, she saw me there. She'd seen that I'd just been in the apartment. And so at the time, she thought it was something odd.
The Madeleine McCann case demonstrates exactly how lies multiply and become harder to maintain over time. Kate McCann's story about forced entry through the bedroom window falls apart when forensic evidence shows no damage and only her fingerprints on the glass. Gerry McCann changes his crucial testimony about which door he used, aligning his new version with Kate's account after investigators start asking tough questions. Jane Tanner claims she witnessed the abduction, but somehow couldn't recognize a child she'd known for years. Each lie requires additional lies to support it. This creates what investigators call a cascade effect. One false statement forces you to create more false statements to maintain consistency. Soon, you're managing multiple contradictory narratives and hoping nobody notices the connections. The McCanns and their friends found themselves trapped in this exact situation, constantly adjusting their stories as new evidence emerged. Martin Smith's identification of Gerry McCann walking toward the beach while carrying a child destroys their entire timeline. This wasn't some random tourist making a mistake. Smith knew what he saw, and watching Gerry carry his son off that airplane months later triggered such a powerful recognition that he felt compelled to contact police. That kind of visceral reaction doesn't come from false memories or mistaken identity. The most important lesson here applies to every aspect of life. When multiple people tell you the same story, but the details keep changing, trust your instincts that something isn't right. When physical evidence contradicts emotional testimony, believe the science. When someone's behavior doesn't match their claims, pay attention to what your gut tells you. Truth has a consistency that lies cannot replicate. Real events leave authentic evidence trails. Genuine emotions produce predictable behavioral patterns. The McCann case shows what happens when people try to construct an alternate reality using media manipulation and coordinated storytelling. They can control the narrative for years, but eventually the contradictions become impossible to ignore. The truth about what happened in apartment 5A that night exists somewhere in the evidence we've examined today. Portuguese investigators, Irish witnesses, and forensic specialists have provided pieces of a puzzle that the mainstream media refuses to assemble correctly. Don't let the official story fool you any longer. Subscribe right now for more investigations that expose the truth behind cases the media wants you to forget. Your support helps us continue questioning the narratives that powerful people spend millions trying to protect.